Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly for pricing. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Built last year, retailed last year, and customized by Rolex for Domino's Pizza in 2021, this is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 36 Domino's Pizza Special Edition. Reference 126000. It is part of the latest redesigned family of Oyster Perpetuals, and it proves that the long-running Domino's Award watch is still available. Now, this program dates back to at least the late 70s and most likely the mid-70s, but Domino's Pizza franchise managers who met certain central office-determined thresholds could choose several awards, of which one was a Rolex watch, traditionally the Air King. Eventually, with the phase out of the Air King in the 2010s, albeit briefly, Domino's and Rolex switched over to the Oyster Perpetual reference. There have been some changes to these watches over the years, as originally the Domino's Pizza logo would have been on the dial. Then in the 2000s, it moved to the bracelet. And then in 2012, Domino's decided to change its logo and its name. It just became Domino's, not Domino's Pizza. As a result, the logo, which appears to be white gold and is still mounted on the bracelet, is now just the Domino's logo. And you can see the reverse side features that 2012 to present Domino's iconography. The watch is 904L steel and a standard Oyster Perpetual 36 of the current generation, which means it wears very easily on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. A quick description of dimensions: 36 millimeters in diameter. The watch is 11.7 millimeters thick. From lug tip to lug tip, it's 43.4 millimeters, and then from end link to end link, the total distance across the wrist is 45.4 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now, when you throw it on your wrist, it would fit a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference, and you can see that with a domed bezel and a relatively flat, thin profile, it slides easily underneath a dress cuff. It easily works as a dress watch. The watch has a 904L stainless steel case and bracelet, a silver sunburst dial, and yellow gold hands, indices, and Rolex crown for a nice warm tonal contrast on the dial side. The watch will easily fit underneath any kind of a cuff, and you can easily see down the barrel just how much clearance I have on each side of my wrist. Now, the watch is also pretty discreet. When it's on your wrist, it's not evident that this is a commemorative of any kind. Critically, unlike a lot of co-branded Rolex watches, including all of the Tiffany's, this watch was made by Rolex for Domino's Pizza. It's a long-running concession by Rolex to one of its longest-running corporate clients. So this is the real thing. There is nothing ersatz or retrofitted or aftermarket about this watch. Now, Rolex makes every part of watch: dial, hands, movement components, case, bracelet, and clasp. And Rolex has its own foundry where it makes its own steel, 904L steel, not unheard of in the watch industry, but quite rare. It's even more anti-corrosive than stainless steel 316L. So this is able to resist sweat, seawater, and certain industrial acids that would in time oxidize and tarnish conventional 316. It's an oyster bracelet that tapers down from the end link profile, which conforms to the case. You can see it's satinated on its top, and then it's polished on its outer face. You can see why I believe the Domino's logo is white gold. It has a much warmer color alongside the satin silver of the steel. Removable links are fixed by screws, and you can see there's a clasp that includes a lift lock system, so you can't just really pull it open. You do have to lift and unlock it, as there's a beak and a hook internally. You can see the Oyster Perpetual clasp is now finished internally, and a feature not previously included on the Oyster Perpetual, you have the 5mm tool-free Easy Link adjustment system, in or out without tools. It's the equivalent of adding or removing one full-sized sizable link. There are also 3 divots, and I'll do my best to show this, but there are 3 divots inside of the clasp, so you can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point of the bracelet inside the clasp. Satination on the top, polishing on the flank. You've got those 3 adjustments, the Easy Link and then the removable links, for 3 different ways to size this watch. Embossed Rolex crowns, something characteristic of the Oyster Perpetuals and the entry-level models in the Rolex catalog. Screw down crown for 100 meters of water resistance. You can see it's a twin lock in steel because it has that one slash on it. That means a twin lock in steel. The case band is graceful. It has a lot in common with the Datejusts and the Date-8s, and very little in common with the Oyster cases of the Explorer 2s, the Dive watches, and the GMT Master. This isn't the super case. It's much more graceful. Satinated on its tops and polished on its side. Here we have a rounded dome-like bezel, giving it a little bit of a bubble-like profile. The first Oyster Perpetual was debuted back in 1933, and it was nicknamed the Bubbleback because it had a bigger case back to accommodate the Perpetual automatic winding rotor in the Oyster water-resistant case. And so the combination of the two created the first truly modern Rolex watch, but also the archetype of the modern sports watch. Now the watch has a sapphire crystal, metallic silver sunburst dial. We have a lovely off-white coloration for the printed indices outboard of the numerals. Take a quick look and you can see that the watch is beautifully executed with Rolex's signature chromolite blue lume and doubled indices at 3, 6, and 9. It also has that lovely off-white, almost ecru coloration to the printed indices outboard of the applique gold indices. We have baton hands at the center that are fluted down the middle for better contrast, and the watch includes a hacking or stop seconds function so you can halt it and set against a reference time more easily. Again, 100 meters water resistant, stop seconds, bidirectional automatic winding, 70-hour power reserve, 31 joules, 8 beats per second. Turn it all over and imagine underneath this Dominos logo, Rolex caliber 3230. It features the Chronergy escapement system, which is LIGA formed, and Rolex's answer to the Omega coaxial. It features a blue oxidized anti-magnetic hairspring made of niobium zirconium, highly anti-magnetic. The hairspring also has a Breguet overcoil made by hand, which allows this watch to keep excellent time in any position with respect to gravity. Furthermore, it helps the watch to earn a COSC chronometer certification, but then Rolex cases up the chronometer certified movement and tests it beyond chronometer standards so that it runs no worse than -2 + 2 seconds per day as a fully assembled watch. That is why Rolex writes superlative chronometer on the dial today. There is a real basis for this term now. It's not just a marketing term. Finally, the balance bridge is anchored on both sides, and there's a free sprung balance, and those two features make the watch more shock tolerant. Also, unlike previous Rolex automatic movements, this one features a rotor bearing rather than a jeweled staff. It's as smooth as ever, but it's now more shock tolerant than the old jeweled staff. So a lot of refinements externally and internally with that wonderful splash of color on the dial, and a rare and somewhat curious tradition in Rolex history. You'll find more Paul Newmans floating around than current generation 6-digit 70-hour power reserve Domino's Pizza Oyster Perpetuals. So reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.